Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest has had an impressive 40-year career in technology. He spent time early in his career at some of the biggest and most iconic tech companies like IBM and HP. He's also been part of leadership teams at a number of startups. That includes being the CEO of 2 growth stage companies. He led his last company, which was the leader in facilities and maintenance management, from 10 million to 100 million in annual recurring revenue. Ultimately, he sold that company in 2021 for 1.2 billion to Fortive. Now he's involved with 10 companies as an investor and an advisor. Please welcome former CEO at ServiceChannel, Tom Buiocchi.
Hey, David. Good morning. How you doing?
Great. It is great to have you. I've been very excited for this conversation.
Thanks for mentioning 40-year career. That means old. And maybe listeners, somebody will remember when IBM and HP were relevant in the tech industry. That's when I was there.
Well, you were there in the heyday.
Back in the day, many decades ago.
All right, let's jump right into it. So what is the one thing you did at ServiceChannel, big or small, that had the biggest impact? And you'll absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future. You've told me you're not going to be, but if you were.
You're starting with the toughest question. There's a million things, right? So I'm going to give you something that is probably unconventional. Maybe no one else has answered this way, but it was something that we sought out for my own personal help. This is my second CEO gig. And as you know, a CEO gig is kind of like a roller coaster, has a love child with the New York Marathon. It's ups and downs and it's craziness and all kinds of things. And you can't really talk to everybody about everything. So I hired an executive CEO coach, an independent professional who do nothing about our business, who I spoke with once a week, almost in a therapy session, right? To talk about what's going on at the business, what's going on with the team, what our challenges were. Sometimes we made no decisions. Sometimes he just helped me think things through clearly. Sometimes he challenged me. Sometimes he kind of made me rethink the way things went. But I found that having someone to talk to at that level where I could share literally everything. I mean, you got employees you can talk to, you got the board you can talk to, you got your spouse you can talk to, but you can't talk to everybody about everything. And a lot of stuff happened. So I personally thought that helped me become a better CEO and eventually helped our team become a better team and execute better. So I would definitely do that again.
And how did you find that person?
So there was a guy that was referred to me, let's call him Jeff because that's his name, in the Bay Area who had done executive coaching for some pretty high-profile CEOs and had done similar executive coaching for high-profile professional athletes. He'd done a bunch of players on the 49ers. He'd done a bunch of players on pro baseball teams. I got to know the guy a little bit, and he said, you know, all these problems you go through, they're common, right? It's people problems, it's organizational problems, it's how do you think things clearly, how do you take a deep breath and step back from the situation you're in. He was fantastic, right? We were very, very lucky.
How many years did you work together?
I worked about 3 years with him. And eventually, we brought him in and his associate to do mini sessions with our executive leadership team. Same thing, a little teamwork, a little culture thing. And he had a perspective that I couldn't have because I was in the mix all the time. And he helped us think things through clearly. And he was a terrific catalyst in the whole game plan.
Wow. You know, I one of the CEOs that I talked to, he said every professional athlete has a coach.
Yep.
So why shouldn't every CEO?
Yeah. It's as you know, it's a lonely gig. It's a lot of ups and downs. It's a lot of sleepless nights. And when you're in the moment, sometimes you're reacting. And I found that Jeff, helped you step back from things and figure things out and talk things through with somebody else who wasn't so in the weeds. It was great.
Wow. I love that. So, you had amazing success with ServiceChannel, both in the scale of the business, the outcome of the business. I mean, everything that I've read about it, that we've talked about, you've had amazing success, and that exit 1.2 billion, like not many people get to that kind of an exit. but that wasn't your first CEO job. And I'm curious if you could maybe give a little bit more context of the first CEO job. What was it, and what was that
Yeah.
outcome?
Speaking of highs and lows, thanks for bringing that one up. So ServiceChannel was my second CEO gig. The first one was about, I think it was 2010. I had been a chief marketing officer at a public company. I wanted to go do a CEO thing, so I left and tried to go find one. And I ended up with a really cool company called Data Robotics at the time, which we renamed Drobo. We made kind of a storage device that either directly connected to your laptop or computer or to your home network that's helped you to more easily store and manage at that time, the exploding number of digital photographs and videos you were starting to take. This is, again, it's 2010 to 2013 kind of thing. And I replaced a very smart, very charismatic, and very popular founder who had gotten sideways with the board. And I went into a bit of a hornet's nest because the gentleman I replaced was, he was the technical linchpin behind the whole company. He was the emotional linchpin behind the company. And he had hired most of the team himself, friends of his and colleagues of his. So went into that. We were able to take the business from about 20 million when I joined to about 40 million about 2 years later. So great growth. We did really, really well. And then in one of my great, execution segments of my life, we were able to take it from 40 back to 20. It was one of those situations where we missed a product cycle badly. We were oblivious, looking backward now, oblivious to this thing called the cloud showing up and being able to store photos. It'll never be able to do what we can do with our. And so we kind of got run over. So we took it from 20 to 40, 40 back to 20. During that period of time, we had an offer to sell the company for $250 million, which we turned down because we thought, oh, no, we're going to keep going, right? It's going to keep going one way. It's going to get better than this. And as it turns out, at the end of the story, the investors decided to sell the company. We literally couldn't find a buyer. Zero, nada, nothing. And at the end of the day, the board decided to gift the company back to the original founder that I replaced. So one day, and I take this as my career not best moment, I stood in front of the company. I fired myself. We handed the company back to the guy I had replaced 3 years earlier. And I think because of the nature of the transaction, we had to take $1 for it. So I think we sold the company for $1. So I have a $1 exit and a $1.2 billion exit, and a lot of stories between those two, and things I do differently.
Wow. I knew the story, the end of the story. I actually did not realize it was back to the original.
Back to the original guy. It was like Steve Jobs returning to Apple, except at a different scale. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So now we have the two ends of the spectrum that you've experienced. That, I'll be honest, you are the first CEO that I've talked to that has had the two end. I've talked to people who've shut down their businesses. Yeah. I've talked to people with the huge exits, but to have the same person who's done both is amazing, because you have this, you actually have seen the same human being running two companies with two opposite income.
I think I was the same guy, but I have to say there's a lot of first-time mistakes you make that no one tells you about, right? And you make those mistakes, and then you learn about it, and maybe under reflection you do things differently the second time. So, yeah, it was amazing, but it circumstance sometimes, and learning along the way.
So as we were talking about doing this, and I appreciate you doing this with me, we were talking about it. You sent me a document that you wrote that's quite a long document that essentially outlines all the things that you did differently at ServiceChannel than Drobo. Is that something that you've shared with the world?
I haven't yet. It's funny. I sat down after being so fortunate at ServiceChannel for the exit that we had, and thought about things for a while. I had a little bit of time to think. And I drew up this little document, A Tale of Two Exits. It was kind of like a play on the old novel, right? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, right? And I think we kind of lived through both, right? And so I tried to reflect on, what did I do differently? What did I learn? what did I do the same? And just luck mattered or something like that. So I've got this thing, it's kind of a top 10 list. I'll add, David Letterman thing. I have a top 10 list of things I did differently. I'd like to put into a presentation or maybe another podcast we do someday. But there's a few that, that come to mind that, you just learn after the first time.
We have to find a way to get that distributed, because I mean, I read it and I was taking all these notes as I was going through it with these things that you to your point, you don't, those first time mistakes, there's a lot. So like my goal for today, actually, I had a lot of different plans, and then I read that document. I said, let's just go through. We're not going to get through everything, but there's a couple key things that I want to talk to you about. Maybe we can start with hiring, since everything really at some level comes down to the team. So maybe we start with hiring, and maybe you can give me that side by side Drobo versus ServiceChannel and what you learned there.
How about this as a teaser to my upcoming document that I haven't released yet? There's a couple that stood out to me, and there was some very uncanny similarities. So I went into ServiceChannel, and lo and behold, I replaced a genius founder again, because that founder at the time was promoted to the board, so to speak, right? And so the whole handling of that situation, we handled very differently at ServiceChannel. We did much more embracing of the founder at this time. We made sure the founder was active on the board. And for 6 years, the founder was tethered to the company through a board relationship. So we got the benefit of all the founder goodness, so to speak. I had to manage that founder goodness, which was not necessarily the easiest thing at times, because the founder obviously has very strong opinions about the business, but it was much more of a overtly collaborative or an attempt at collaboration to keep the founder close. And ultimately that paid up dividends for us, because we got the good bits. And I had to manage the bad bits, but that was better than avoiding it. So that was number one thing we did. The second thing was, first time around, and this was some feedback I got, I acted more like a manager than an owner. I would do the right things that I thought the board wanted to be done. They were fairly, tactical, conservative things, and didn't take a lot of the steps you'd take if you were the owner of the company. So I thought I was managing the company on behalf of somebody else. Second time through, I had the mindset, this is my company. I didn't own the whole company, right? I owned a small fraction of the company. But I took on a different mindset of, this is my company. I'm going to make the decisions I need to make this company successful. And I will tell the board what I'm doing, right? Now, it wasn't that easy, obviously, much more collaborative, but I took a very different mindset. The third thing, I'll get to the hiring in a second, David, sorry. The third thing, and I'll take this lesson, give full credit to my investors from Excel, who used to come into the early ServiceChannel meetings and say, Tom, everything's on track. It's really nice. It's extremely boring. You're running all running plays. Maybe you forgot we're venture capitalists. We'd like to see a couple passing plays in here once in a while. Run a trick play, run a flea flicker. It's not always the most logical, risk-free conclusion that you should execute on. Take a shot, do some things. We don't want to win the game 5-3. We want to win the game 41-0, right? And so they stretched our thinking, and which really led to new revenue streams, new ideas, new people, and kind of a broadening of the business. Now, getting to the hires, I think this is probably the biggest lesson I learned. At Drobo, I went immediately back to my old network of who are the guys I used to work with, who I really liked working with. It'd be fun to work with them again. I know how to manage them. It'd be easy to manage them. It's convenient. I'll just call them. We don't have to go through much of a vetting process because I know them already. It's comfortable for me. I'll sleep better at night. They know exactly what I want. They know my language. And it's probably better for team harmony. That was great, except it led to kind of mediocre execution. We never really pushed ourselves. We never really executed sharply. And I found that convenient hires weren't always the best hires, right, given the situation. Some of them came because I was familiar with them, not because they were experts in a certain area. It was more to make me feel, good. At ServiceChannel, we went way out on some unconventional hires that, quite frankly, challenged me in a managerial way, challenged me in a partnership way, challenged me with ideas that I knew nothing about. We hired some marketplace experts. I knew nothing about marketplaces. And they came in and basically told me on day one that our business model was all screwed up and we needed to change it. And okay, this is going to be great at the staff meeting, right? And it led to a lot of debate and a lot of conflict and a lot of arguments. And it was a lot harder for me to manage the team. Ultimately, it led to a very comfortable outcome by being uncomfortable during that process. So I learned a lot about hiring, so much so that at one point in time, my partner, Brent, who was our president and CFO, put his arms on my shoulder and said, Tom, you've hired the last 2 CROs, and we've had to get rid of them both. I'll hire the next one, okay? So hiring's a big deal. Hiring's a big deal, and team building is a big deal.
That is so, I think for a lot of people, that is actually so counterintuitive, because you talk to so many people who say, oh, we'll bring in the CEO, we'll bring in the CRO, we'll bring in whatever leader, and they'll bring in their team.
Right.
They'll bring in the people that they know, they'll do, and it'll be really fast, and they'll be up and running, working. And by the way, even me, when I think about my company, I think to myself, shouldn't I bring my band back together?
Yeah.
But when I read that, and when you're talking about it now, like it is comfortable, and actually the comfortable thing is actually the problem.
Right. The comfortable hires led to an uncomfortable exit for me. That last day at Drobo wasn't that comfortable, but paradoxically, uncomfortable hires led to a very comfortable exit at ServiceChannel. And it's not just a one-to-one course, but it does sometimes when you're cooking. I have a lot of food analogies. When you're making soup, sometimes you need to add a little spice to it, right? And so we added some spice. It was risky to some people, but it turned out to be the best thing we ever did.
I want to talk about the uncomfortable hiring, given that you didn't know those people. What was the primary source? Was that internal recruiting? Was that a search firm? Was that the board?
No, it was interestingly enough, a venture firm that chose not to invest chose to pass on our fundraising round. We got to know some of the team, and I won't name them. We got to know some of the team, and they were experts in building online marketplaces. They had worked for online marketplaces in the past. Some of them were executives at eBay and other places, and they had espoused to us during our fundraising process, you need to be a marketplace. We weren't. We were a SaaS company at the time. And we argued about it. And they basically told us during our pitch rounds all the things we were doing wrong. And when we got to a point where we needed some more juice in the business, we went back to those guys and said, look, you liked our business, but you thought we had the wrong model and you thought we had the wrong skill set and you would have done things differently. Why don't you come join us and teach us how to do that? And it led to probably 3 or 4 month courtship with a couple of these guys in which we were feeling each other out. Do I want to leave this comfortable cush job at a venture firm and go back in the weeds kind of thing? And then we decided to jump off a bridge together. And I remember at the time, my executive team, my board saying, careful what you wish for. This is going to be a ride, baby. Things are going to change. And so we had to inject change, and we did it. And it wasn't comfortable at the time, but we worked our way through it.
Wow, I love that. I will say the thing you said, I wrote down, like conflict. The conflict, when my reflection on my own operating experience, is the thing I did the worst was drive conflict. I didn't drive enough conflict, or let's say allow enough conflict.
I wanted, when debates started in staff meetings, I would try to, we all agree on this, don't we? Kind of thing. Instead of letting it run for a while, because it's uncomfortable to do that, right? And we were doing this, by the way, this team building and this team enhancement came just before and then during COVID, right? So a lot of the times you're in a room where the magic happens together and the teams bond because they live together, essentially, we were all on Zoom together. The teams, with the addition of new folks on the team, you didn't get to know each other intimately like you did when you're in an office, 10 or 12 or 15 hours a day. You got to know each other because you're on 1 hour Zooms all day. And so that bonding took longer, and it was a little more complicated, as you know.
Wow. Another topic, something I'm very passionate about, is identifying the right customer, the right buyer to go after. I think it's something that a lot of first time, even multi-time, early late stage make mistakes. And that's one of the things that you talk about in the document is understanding that buyer, understanding the TAM. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things I really am try to emphasize is kind of segment until it hurts kind of thing. And I'll give you an example of what we had at ServiceChannel, which is an indication. So we went through a couple marketing departments and a couple sales organizations along the way, right? And we had a mantra that our target market was retail, right? And that was it, retail. So in the pipeline process and in the lead generation process, we'd get Walmart. We'd get 2 bakeries on the Upper West Side, right? A guy that owns a bagel shop on 79th Street. We'd get a small restaurant in Belgium, right? Because that's retail kind of thing. We'd get McDonald's, which is largely franchised, right? We get all kinds of stuff. We'd spend a tremendous amount of time vetting it, having sales calls, et cetera, only to find out our close rate was terrible. And we were letting a lot of things in the funnel that didn't really fit what our target market it wasn't really retail. And so we went out and tried to refine it. We ended up with something, and I'll do this from memory, right? That our target market wasn't retail. It was retail if you retail something related to food or fashion, food or apparel, those 2 things, right? It had to be 100 locations or more in North America only, primarily in the US, because that's where we had coverage. It had to be geographically distributed. We didn't want 100 locations in the same town because it wouldn't adhere to our value proposition. We wanted it multi-state, multi-region, the more national, the better. Had to be geographically widely distributed. That's where our value proposition really kicked in. It had to be company owned. We didn't want franchises because company owned means centralized decision making. We could call on somebody who could make a decision. Franchises, I'm not calling on every guy that owns 3 Subways, right? Or 3, Jimmy John's. I can't do that, right? It had to have centralized facilities management. A great example is Costco. You think Costco would be a great customer. Well, they have different facilities managers at every Costco that operate independently. It's not centrally, so you could never get someone to make a decision there, right? So that falls out. And we wanted to call on people where consistency of brand mattered. So if you think about an Apple store, retail, and the consistency of brand they have, and I'll just make a contrast here, not to be disparaging, Dollar General, right? It's a different level of brand awareness kind of thing. And so we had all those filters, and it turns out we did an analysis, and there were 600, I'm getting close, I think 682 companies in the United States that fit that description. 682. And we knew the names of all 682. So long story to say, my pitch to folks these days, what I'm trying to give advice is, don't fish in an ocean, fish in a pond. And fish in a pond where you know the names of all the fish, right? So segment it down to a level of detail where you can literally name the fish in the pond. Because if I had said, we're going after retail, we're going to get a, 3-location church in the Netherlands, right? Versus what we really wanted, which is a Walmart or a CVS or an Apple store or a Chipotle or a Panda Express, right? Very different.
That is literal goal. I mean, segment until it hurts is such a good way to describe I think you just listed, I think it was 10 or 11 attributes that you use to segment. 10 or 11. Most people are using 2 or 3. And that is gold. I think if people can hear one thing and take something away from a go-to-market perspective, we have another that we want to talk about later. But this is such gold, because when you understand, when you're fishing in that pond and you know who every person is, like you said, you can also tailor that. Like, the message is going to resonate with all of them. The go-to-market motion is going to resonate. The pricing, the product, everything.
I'll never forget our head of sales, the guy I didn't hire, who ended up being the greatest head of sales ever. He came in. We went through this exercise with him helping to drive it tremendously. And when we got done, he basically went to his BDRs and his sales organization and said, "Here's the 682 names. Here's 25 for you by name. If you call anybody else on this list, I'll kill you. I'll fire you, right? Here's 25 for you. When you get all those 25, I'll give you 25 more, right? Here's your 25." And it made people focus like heck and build relationships with these 20. We didn't get all 25, but everybody we engaged with was right in the sweet spot, right? And the feedback was pure, and, we didn't get cluttered chasing things we didn't want to chase, right? It was great. It was great.
That is gold. When we talk about focus, another area that I saw there about focus was around metrics and KPIs, and really focusing on the right metrics. Can you give me that example, the Drobo versus ServiceChannel, of KPI metrics and what you measure?
God, I had, again, it's almost paradoxical at Drobo. I think I had a metric sheet, in 2 fonts with about 400 lines on it, right? We could measure everything, right? The bottom line is we were doing a lot of reporting and not a lot of results building, right? We had a lot of issues, and I thought, give a lot of metrics, maybe that'll supersede the results. No, it doesn't work that way, right? Usually, when you try to bury someone in metrics, you're trying to hide something, right? And we just didn't have the results, and we spent a lot of time tracking things, right? Things that probably didn't matter, right? Just because we could. At ServiceChannel, again, the lesson I learned from some of the folks we had hired was no more than 3 objectives per year. That's it. What are your top 3 things that are going to move the needle? So we had literally 1, 2, and 3, and we measured very different things. We tried not to measure the results. Sometimes you're in a SaaS business, for example, you get the venture capital, churn and net retention and gross retention and magic number and all that kind of stuff. Well, those are all results, right? But what's causing those results? So we tried to, we still kept track of those, but we tried to measure some of the causal effects of what was driving the business, some things that were maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. I have 2 in particular that I thought were very helpful to us that most companies wouldn't track. One is we tracked product usage in a different way. Our product helped facilities managers issue work orders. And if you think about it, if they're active with the product and they're issuing a lot of work orders to clean things up and fix things across their properties, the frequency by which they do that is an indicator of certain things. So we would watch work order frequency, and when it was cranking up, we'd go in and raise price. Because guess what? They're really on the drug, and they're getting more and more on the drug all the time. So we'd structure price increases. We weren't just kind of trying to take money. We're doing it at a time when we thought they were so addicted to the product that there was some inelasticity there. So we'd structure things, and we'd give things away for free too, but don't get me wrong, but that was a good time. And I'll never forget, we watched one of our largest customers, work orders declining over time, and they churned. And then we put on a watch with every customer success manager on, you need to report when work orders decline more than 5% month on month, because that means they're getting ready to churn. It was the greatest indicator for us. We were able to helicopter in and kind of stop the bleeding many times and save the account, because that was a big thing. And if you looked at the data on how they were using the product, we could tell what trades that they were using more or less of, or having problems. Was it plumbing? Was it HVAC? And then make suggestions to them on how to improve that particular behavior, which led to some new products for us where they could go find and source better contractors, which is a big deal for us, and use the data in the platform to do that. So the usage data turned out to be gold for us, and we love that. The other thing, which is kind of non-intuitive, is we sold to directors and VPs of facility management, and their half-life at a company is about 2 to 3 years. And we found that when they went to another company, they often brought ServiceChannel with them. So we had a job board. We knew where everybody was. We knew when they got fired or when they left. And we would, the first call they would get when they left their job was from us. How can we help? How can we find you and help you get a different job? And so it turns out our lead generation had a lot to do with the turnover in the segment, which was great. It was great.
Love that. And so is it fair to say, basically, from the metrics you measured, you were looking at inputs a little bit more than outputs, or leading indicators more than lagging indicators?
Yeah, actually, you just said it a lot more succinctly than I told the story. You told me the headline. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. And they were all metrics that were directly correlated with growth. There are a lot of metrics you can measure that are correlated with just reporting and data and interest and curiosity. But if they weren't directly correlated with growth, they weren't on our top 3.
I want to go back to something you said before about Excel and them talking to you about the running plays versus the passing plays, and swinging for the fences, going bigger. Mm-hmm. Was that... They weren't your only investor, right? That you had other investors.
They were our only venture investor. We had some private equity money from an earlier round that I was part of with a few folks I got together with. Yeah.
But otherwise, it was Excel was the only venture investor.
Yeah.
And how did you manage that? When you were getting that push, I'm curious, because obviously Excel was my investor as well. I think that one of the things they're very good at is they've seen so many companies that have just taken it to one, not 41-0, like 200-0. They've seen it so many times. The challenge is, for me, it's like, how do you balance the passing plays with the running plays when you have who's seen a full pass offense? I'm curious from your perspective, and because you tied that with the not being a manager, being the owner, which I like that concept as well. Like, how do you think about how you manage that relationship, or you took that input and did that testing?
I have to say that the 2 board members are Rich Wong and Arun Matthew from Excel, who were on our board. They always brought feedback that was not, wasn't ever considered punitive or forceful or kind of rude, right? It was always, here's how we think about things. Here's how some of our other companies have thought about things. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? They would lead you down a path that wouldn't cause you to be defensive at all. It wouldn't cause you to rationalize at all. It would cause you to think. And then, fortunately, like as you said, they've got 100 CEOs in their portfolio who have hit the ball out of the park. They can, hey, talk to this guy, talk to that guy, see what they did when they were at this inflection point. So they really educated you and guided you as opposed to forcing. And that, we didn't always get it the first time, right? Sometimes it took us a while to get it, but they were very collaborative in how they guided us along the way.
There's one concept that in there that document you wrote, which has been, and when we had coffee, like I have been thinking about it since that, which is the concept of the growth roadmap. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and it didn't really put that term on it until after the fact, but in fact, that's kind of what we did. So everybody knows about your product roadmap. Every company has a product roadmap. They obsess over it, countless hours arguing over, when will this be done? Is this feature in or out of this release? this customer asked for this priority. It's a massive amount of time and energy into prioritizing things, some of which, by the way, don't matter. Shocker, right? Turning the red button to green on which so-and-so customer wanted you to do, or else they're going to churn. It's something it's not going to matter to your growth, right? But you get those arguments all the time, and the company is completely mesmerized by the product roadmap. Every company pitch. So here's my product roadmap. Here's my this. Here's my that. Well, some of that stuff directly impacts growth, and some of it doesn't, right? And we argued internally that pricing, new product or module introductions, discounting strategies, bundling or rebundling strategies, adding new revenue streams where one didn't exist before, all the things that had impacts on the top line were the most direct drivers of growth. So we had a pricing roadmap. When are we raising prices? And by how much? And we'd have it, by every quarter. When are we going to do it? When are we changing our discount policy? Let's talk about that. When are we introducing this new idea that we had on selling our data and benchmarking things? Well, because we can charge for that. Okay, great. When are we going to, do this or that kind of thing? When are we going to rebundle things so we can change price in a way that doesn't change price for everybody, kind of thing? We hired pricing experts from Simon-Kucher. They came in and they helped us build this whole thing out. And we talked about this a lot. And it turns out sometimes when you talk about that, you don't always do it, right? But it leads you to things like, why am I doing these product features? Has nothing to do with my growth, right? I spent 700 hours deciding if the button should be green or blue or whatever. It's not affecting my growth. So we had a growth roadmap too. We didn't call it that at the time, but it was about pricing, bundling, introduction of new products, discount strategies, new revenue streams that we had invented that we're going to try out, all that kind of stuff. And I think companies would do well to spend more time on that as opposed to just small features.
Who owns that? Like the head of product owns the product roadmap. Who owns that?
We had a little group, right? It was our product guy. We had a business development team and our sales guy, right? We talked about, and our CFO, I should say, because, the financials and the pricing had to do with it. So we had wrestling matches over that kind of stuff to figure out when and how we would do types of things. And there'd be all kinds of pushback. Oh, you can't do that. They're going to churn, right? If you raise price at this time, they're going to leave us. So a lot of debates, but it was the kind of debate that had a direct impact, right?
Did you, when you talk about all the things that were on that growth roadmap, was there also marketing types of things, or was it mostly pricing, packaging, bundling?
It was marketing in support of those things. So how would we communicate? What would we introduce to kind of package things the right way, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't really outbound lead generation kind of marketing stuff. It was more of how do we communicate that we're going to go do this thing.
I'm gonna add to this concept because I've taken that and I've actually been the companies I've been working with adding the marketing and sales kind of roadmap, if you will, of things that we don't have the resources to do. We don't have the budget. But we know that if we do this, it's going to move the needle. And it has been just saying growth roadmap, like using that term, people's brains there starts to be all kinds of conversations like, no, I know what we could do. I don't have the budget this or the people this quarter. Let's put that for Q1 of next year. And when you start piling them up, almost the opportunities are endless that you didn't even look at before, just like a product roadmap. No one's product is feature complete. Most roadmaps go out
forever. Right.
Exactly.
And it's amazing and you know this, right? The level of emotion that presents itself during product roadmap discussions. My customer asked for that feature. We can't do that feature because we're going to do this feature for that customer, or we can't do all these features that the customers asked for because we need to build something we can charge for, right? We're not going to do all this free stuff. So all that emotion goes in there. But if you step back and put a different lens on it, which is what's going to drive the growth, it will help you prioritize your product features. And obviously, you do product features for a lot of reasons, right? Retention and customer satisfaction. But it's just a different lens I think you got to put on things.
I love that. One of the topics that's very big these days is a conversation about founder mode, and getting in the weeds and micromanaging and doing all that stuff. And, different people have different
Yeah.
opinions. You've experienced, it seems like, different approaches to, let's say, founder mode or CEO mode, micromanaging. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of those things on the top 10 things I did differently, right? I was very involved at Drobo in, I'd go to the product meetings, I'd go to the sales meetings, I'd go to the marketing meetings, right? I wanted to make sure things were getting done the right way or my way or, in line with the way I was thinking about them. And I was much too involved in things that I should have delegated or, quite frankly, that didn't turn the big knobs, right? And at ServiceChannel, as uncomfortable as it was for me, we'll go back to that term again, there were things I was dismissed from doing. Hey, Tom, you can't go on any more early sales calls. Not happening. I'm not inviting you. You talk too much. You pitch the company story for 45 minutes. You don't ask any questions. Stay home. We'll bring you in when we need you. Hey, Tom, we're negotiating the terms of a deal. You can't be involved because you're going to give away everything, right? You stay back here. We'll tell you how it's going, right? So there were a lot of things that I was, politely dismissed from doing, which gave me time to think more about bigger ideas and broader vision, maybe. And I was probably a lot less annoying, right? To be frank, right? And the team just did great. So big lesson learned there. I think you get involved with the things that make a big difference, that help chart the course of the company. But there's a lot of weeds that I found not to be helpful to be involved in.
What is the biggest challenge you ever faced at ServiceChannel, and how did you overcome that challenge?
We rebuilt the team and changed the course of the company during COVID. And I found that communication across the company and keeping people aligned was remarkably unique in that situation and almost unprecedented and very difficult. Nothing I had learned up to that point in time taught me how to do that. So I went to an over-communication strategy, which may have annoyed people, but whatever. So I sent out a company email every day, or a Slack every day. Here's what happened today. I mean, we had 200 employees working from home. How do they know what happened that day, right? They weren't in the office. Here's some things that happened today. Here's some good news. Here's a deal we won. Here's a deal we lost. Here's a milestone we hit in product. Whole company, everybody got that. And I did it for probably a year until people told me to slow it down, right? We went there like twice a week or something. We went to monthly all hands meetings. Everybody in the company, all hands meetings, right? We had functional all hands meetings where the head of sales would come on and say, let me just tell you what's going on in sales for the whole company. So I found that, and again, in the midst of this, we had hired new executives who nobody knew, right? So the over-communication portfolio, so to speak, during COVID, while we were trying to change the direction of the company, I think was the toughest thing we had to get through. If we hadn't gelled during that period of time, we would have never got out, right?
Yeah. Well, when you said unprecedented, I think the one theme across however many interviews I've done now for this podcast is COVID was really an unprecedented moment for whatever the business was. As being a CEO, like, there's not much more complicated stuff like that you could go through, between people's actual health, and risk, fear, and the uncertainty, and the markets, and the company dynamics, and work and customer dynamics. Like, it was, I think CEOs who went through it, it will be it's like scarred in everyone's mind forever. But I think that a lot of other people, it's kind of like they lived through it, but they didn't. It was different. I believe it was different for the people, the CEOs who were responsible for all the employees and their families.
The level of accountability and responsibility in that period of time ratcheted up like 10x, right? You just felt like you had a lot more um, uh, responsibility for the team, right? I mean, they had to be the communication had to increase, right? You had to care about their families, what was going on. You had to care about people getting sick. You had to care about all kinds of things. It wasn't just kind of coming to work. It was much more complicated, as I think everybody knows by now.
So you had Tale of Two Exits, super successful with ServiceChannel. Um, when you reflect on this and your career in general, and you've seen a lot of successful companies, and um, is it luck? Is it skill?
Yeah, I I wish I could put that formula in a bottle. I'll add one more word though. Another word is like grit or resilience, right? Because so I think gone are the days, at least in tech, gone are the days where you can just be smart and be successful, right? Because things change, and if you don't have resilience and grit, and you're not there to win, right, it's no good, right? And there were a lot of smart people who didn't, their timing wasn't right, or they didn't get lucky at some point in time. And that, let's face it, luck had a lot to do with it, right? Um, I think it's mostly a combination of smarts and resilience. And if you're doing this, the skill and resilient thing, and you're in the game long enough, luck will come your way. Luck doesn't always show up when you want it to. The pandemic accounted for a surge in our business because retailers are closing down and opening up and closing down and opening up and sanitizing more than they ever had to and cleaning more than they had to and revamping their stores to have a drive-through lane now. And so now all of a sudden our work exploded. That was lucky, right? We didn't plan that kind of thing. And, we sold the company a couple of months before inflation and interest rates went berserk, and a couple of months before the invasion of Ukraine and the world changed, right? So there's a lot of macro things that happened that, call it luck or not, we had nothing to do with, right? And we were fortunate in our timing. So I think it's a lot of skill and a lot of resilience, and you play the game for a long time, and luck shows up every now and then, and you can't plan for it. I wish I could predict the luck thing, right? It'd be a lot easier.
That is good advice, though, and I've heard that advice from a lot of people who've been doing this for a while at many companies. Like, if you stay in long enough and you put yourself in the right position, again, luck will come at varying degrees, but if you stay in long enough, and you're smart
and you do the right things, right? Yeah.
So how about just your background? Did you always know you wanted to be a CEO? Was that, did you kind of build your career to get there?
Not really. So it's funny. My dad worked for IBM for 40 years. He had one job, IBM. That's it. Hometown, IBM, went to work every day. Never knew the concept of having multiple jobs. So I got out of school and I started as an engineer at IBM. And then I left the company business, so to speak, the family business, and went to work for HP for a while. And only after about 11 or 12 years of my career did I think, maybe I'll try this smaller company thing, this startup thing, because I was very risk averse at the time. And so I jumped into it probably in my early to mid 30s and have been going to other companies since then. So I worked for 7 companies. Since I left HP, I worked for 7 companies, 5 of which had exits.
Wow.
But as we talked about, some were better than others.
Yeah.
Right?
But you were in these various roles, and you became executive at these companies, and that shift from being an exec to being the CEO, like, what was that people coming to you saying?
It was one of those situations where I started as a product manager. I moved into marketing. I became a CMO at a couple places, and including a couple large public companies. And I remember vividly, I turned 50, and I thought to myself, I think I can be a CEO. I mean, I've done all these jobs, right? I've worked around the world. I've worked for big companies. I've worked for small companies. I've seen CEOs. I've seen good ones. I've seen bad ones. Um, I should probably give this thing a shot, right? And so, I don't say unexpectedly, I planned it. I quit on my 50th birthday. I didn't have a deal, right? I left and I thought, okay, I know enough people. I'll meander around. I'll find a CEO gig somewhere. It took a long time, it turns out. And so I left on that venture, and it probably took 9 months to find the Drobo gig. And I was very lucky that I did. I learned a lot, and probably wouldn't have done ServiceChannel unless I had done the Drobo thing. So it's part of the journey. But I decided at age 50, I got to do this thing, right? And so that was it. A little late in the game, right?
Yeah. No, it's great. It's a great, and do you like, who do you think has had the biggest impact on your career throughout this career? Like, did you have a mentor, a person, an investor, or was,
I didn't actually. I mean, I was thinking about this. There's probably no one person, sometimes you go under someone's wing and that happens and so forth. It's probably a collection of folks. I was able to work for, a number of different CEOs from different places. I was able to work alongside investors from, Excel and Greylock and RRE here in New York, and NEA and a few others. So you get to see a lot of folks, and I think it's a little bit of a cocktail of that stuff, right? You pick up the good stuff, you try to say, I would never do that, and you kind of build your own path. But no, I don't think I could name one person. I guess, you go back to like your parents taught you you're right from wrong and how to do the right things. That's kind of been the guiding light, right? For me, is you kind of do right by other people and do right by the team, and that all helps. But other than that, in the professional world, probably not.
what is it like deep down that drives you, that has driven you through all these different roles? Like, I always tell people, mine is like, when people tell me I can't do something,
I have to do
it's
that.
literally the only thing to motivate me, is to tell me I can't do something. Like, what is it that drives you?
I like, I tell you, I get the best feeling when I can help somebody. Like I meet somebody, we talk about stuff, we do things, and I say, hey, I know a guy who could help you get another job because I know a guy at this company, or I know someone who's doing that kind of thing. You should give him a call and figure it out. Or I like that form of collaboration. Played team sports quite a bit. I love the teamwork aspect of it. I love the winning as a team kind of thing, but more so I like the competing as a team kind of thing. It's just kind of that, maybe it's not politically correct. It's kind of that locker room feel of you're collaborating with folks to get something done. I enjoy that process. And, in all of our careers, you win some, you lose some, but you play, right?
Yeah, I love, one of the sessions we did with my executive team at one point, at an offsite, we went around and the moderator said, "What is the best team you've ever been a part of?" and asked everyone on the executive team. And he said, "Okay, everyone think about it. Okay, now share." And as everyone went through, without fail, every person, it had to do with some sports team that they were on. So one was like the volleyball team, and the other one was the soccer team when I was 10, and the other one, and literally every person's answer had to do with some kind of team sport. And it was, for me, so interesting. And then he said, "And why was that the best team?" And everyone's answers came back to something about trust and liking the other people. And for me, it was the most interesting experience because no one said speed, skill, strength, this. It literally had nothing to do with that. And to your point, it wasn't the undefeated teams. It was just the fact that they played the game together and enjoyed playing that game.
Yeah.
What is one piece of advice, knowing everything you know today? If you go back to the very beginning of your career, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself?
A couple words come to mind. So authenticity comes to mind. There have been parts of my career where I tried to be someone I wasn't, kind of thing, right? Either to be better part of the team that I was with, or get out of my comfort zone. I never was really good at that, right? I think the resilient thing is important. You're going to play this game for a long time, right? You got to be able to handle it, right? The ups and downs. The one thing I think I tell myself that again, looking back now, is I thought there are points, times in my career where I thought I needed to be the hero, right? I'm going to go into Drobo. I'm going to fix that company, right? I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to get involved in every level of detail. I'm going to make it successful with my will, and I'm going to get in there and do it. Well, it turns out that annoys the crap out of everybody, and it always is not the best way to build a team, kind of thing. And I think at ServiceChannel, I was by no means the hero, right? It was great. I may have helped a team of heroes, come together as a team and give some direction and so forth, and enable them to be heroes. But I felt much better with that approach than I got to carry it on my back and I'm going to get the ball over the goal line myself. So I think that's, again, personal styles are different, but there's no need to be the hero, right? And I think a lot of people need to tell themselves that.
That's great advice. So now you're working with a bunch of different companies and helping the next generation. Can you just share a little bit about that? Are you advising, investing?
Yeah, they're mostly early stage companies with first time founders or first time CEOs, folks in their maybe mid to late 20s to mid 30s, and it's kind of interesting. Some founders in that category don't want help from an old guy that's been around for 40 years, and some do. But what I've found really encouraging is that, and you know this, right? 99% of the issues that they face we'll have seen before. Hey, I got a really bad head of engineering who doesn't listen to what I say. What should I do? Well, I think I know what to do. I made that mistake. Or, my sales guy, he's a really nice guy, but he hasn't made his number in 4 quarters, right? What should I do? Or I'm negotiating a partnership agreement with this big company, and here are the terms. What do you think? Oh, gee, they're trying to screw you, okay? So it's a lot of stuff through pattern recognition we've seen before. I enjoy it because I think I can add some value, and I hope, and quite frankly, it's interesting for me. There's a lot of new technologies out there. There's a lot of new interesting things. Keeps me a little bit off the street, right?
I love it. Tom, I really sincerely thank you for doing this with me. And I hope that you find a way, and maybe I can help you publish the document.
Oh, yeah.
Because people there's so much in there. And to your point, things that other people are going through, mistakes other people are making, that if they can read that, it'll save them, those mistakes. So I hope we get that published some way, but in the meantime, we'll get this out there and in front of people. So thank you for doing this.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's fun. Thanks for thinking of me.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, hope you enjoyed. I'm sure you took away a lot from this conversation, and please share it with your networks, like it, subscribe, all of that. And we'll see you for the next episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.